Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Black Social Capital Podcast. We have an exciting guest here today that I am excited to introduce. So, we're going to dive right in and I'm going to tell you about our guest. Today's guest is Dr. Laura McGowan-Robinson. Dr. Laura is a mother, educator, school founder, and advocate for racial equity. She has focused her efforts on creating policies and practices for Black and Latinx educators so that they can thrive while working in public education. She does this with the nonprofit organization that she founded and is the current CEO of, called the Diversity in Leadership Institute, or DLI. Before DLI, Dr. Laura taught in public schools in Chicago and Los Angeles. She then served as a nonprofit executive in K through 12 education at policy advocacy and as the founder and executive director of a middle school in South Los Angeles. Welcome, Dr. Laura.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you all so much for having me.
Look, y'all, I'm excited for this episode. As some of y'all know, I was in the higher ed space for a while, and now I'm back to my roots, helping to support those that are transitioning into the K-12 space, especially brand new teachers, and that's where I connected with Dr. Laura. So really excited to chat with her today as well. I'm gonna dive right in with questions. Um, I got my undergrad degree in cinema, and so I was really aware of the Oscar So White movement, of really focusing on diversity in the entertainment space. Wanting to know from you uh, exactly why you feel diversity within education, leadership is important, and how it became a part of your passion.
Thanks for the question, Dr. Theo. And it's something that's very personal to me. I didn't know a world without Black and Brown educators. I didn't come to know that world, I should say, until I stepped foot on campus of University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. From the time I was in pre-K all the way until I was in high school, I always had access to or had direct instruction from a Black or Brown educator, and that those very early experiences really shaped who I've become, and they affirmed me. They saw my Blackness as an asset, not something that needed to be overcome. They saw the beauty in this dark skinned girl. And it wasn't always trendy. Sometimes it was hard out here for dark skinned folks. But I always felt beautiful. I always felt smart. I always felt intelligent because I was affirmed on a regular basis. And I always felt like I could do anything or be anything. And so I really think that those early experiences shaped. And when I got into places where I was the only or one of few, I
Mhm.
still held those experiences very close to me and deep in my heart. And so I was still able to move and navigate, even though I was dealing with these new feelings of kind of imposter syndrome and not feeling though as though I belong. I was always able to tap back into that, or at least make some phone calls to help so folks could remind me who I am and whose I am. And so
Mhm.
those experiences and those relationships really that's what I want all of our kids to experience. And so when I moved from Chicago to LA, I recognized that a lot of my kids didn't have those experiences. And it was jarring to me because I'm like, I'm looking at the landscape, I'm seeing all these Black and Brown folks, but it's not reflected in our public schools. And
Mhm.
so I had lots of questions and often had questions from my students about, especially when they found out I was a principal, like, you're the principal. Like it was an impossibility. Like they had never seen it before. But I now recognize in some cases they hadn't seen it before, but it was also an awakening for them about what could be and what was possible, because they saw something or someone in a position that they'd never seen before. And so I started that quest. When I learned that, I was like, okay, so how do we get more folks who look like our kids, not just in positions of leadership, but also in teaching and in the education sector more broadly, policy, because often these spaces lack racial diversity. And so that my own personal story is really what informs what I'm doing now professionally.
That's look, I get excited because I think we often say that you can't be what you don't see, right? But I think when you're the person that people see, it's different impact as well, right? I'm supposed to be here for a reason. Sometimes that's good pressure, sometimes that's bad, but I think that when we have those opportunities for leadership and we do well at those roles, uh, the ripple effect is amazing. Wanted to see if you could share for those of folks that don't know um, more about the programs and policies that California has put in place or is looking to put in place that kind of help with the mission of diversity within the education space.
Yes, I can say that billions of dollars have been invested in the pipeline of educators in California since 2016 and 2017. We've seen even more of an influx during COVID with the teacher educator effectiveness block grant that released about a little over $1 billion to bring in more educators, and part of that allowed some LEAs or school districts or charter organizations to tap into those funds for professional development, to build out their own educator pipeline, or even think about ways to diversify their pipelines. But specifically, the work that we've been doing at DLI has really been focused on the leadership aspect of it. And one thing I can say is, while those investments in the teacher pipeline are incredibly important, and I believe they're important, I also believe that we should be thinking about how we're diversifying the leadership ranks as well. Because research has proven time and time again that very strong leadership adds to higher retention rates, specifically around diversifying school leadership, work that we've done at DLI in looking at the impact of Black and Brown school leadership. We've seen that it's decreasing suspensions. We've seen increases in A through G course completion, which we know are prerequisites for you to get into a Cal State or a UC. We've also seen when we look at math and ELA achievement, higher rates on standardized test scores when we have Black and Latinx school leadership. And so what we were wondering is, why hasn't there been a concentrated effort to bring in a more diverse school leadership pipeline in California? And so that question, as the question around like the work of diversity and leadership and why we do this work, was one that stayed with me. And over the last year or so, I'd say a couple of years now, we were on a campaign to figure out how we can get an investment from the state of California to diversify our school leadership ranks. And we were successful in having a budget allocation, and it's called Diverse Education Leadership Pipeline Initiative. And in education, we love our acronym, so we call it DELPI for short. But this is a $10 million budget allocation that would go to school districts and charter organizations who are looking to diversify their school leadership pipeline. And they have to have a demonstrated record around wanting to build out more culturally responsive school leadership, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion as a centerpiece in their work. And so it's not just enough to say, we want more leaders of color, but we want leaders of color who have the right mindset, who believe in the brilliance of our babies, and who are invested in seeing the tide change, in that we see more effective instruction, we see students leaving our schools thriving, and being able to access any career or college pathway that they would want to access. So that's one that we've pushed really hard for, especially in this budget climate. And I know you all are very well aware in the state of
Mhm.
California that we're in pretty dire straits as it relates to our budget. So the fact that we were able to get this passed, but not only get it passed, but passed with a focus on diversifying education and education leadership. So that's pretty huge and something we're proud of. And so over the next, I'm anticipating several months, there'll be opportunities for districts and charters to apply for these funds. Those dollars will be coming through the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and it's administered by the California Department of Education.
Mm. Y'all see that? We got policy, we got dollars, and policy plus dollars usually goes into impact. So excited to hear all the things that are going on. Dr. Jackie, I know you got
Congratulations.
some questions as well.
I do have some questions, but before I dive into my questions, one of the things that I was thinking about while you were talking is how, there's this movement around representation matters, right? And then there's like this additional movement on top of that, which is fine, where people are like, well, it's more than representation. It's about the quality of what the representation is doing. And I just want to highlight that you're doing both. You're doing both at the same time. And it started with representation mattering. And I think that in a lot of cases, when the discourse um, tries to move away from like quantity into quality, right? We lose that quantity is also important. You can't really have one without the other. And I mean, it can be a both and. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So I appreciate what you're doing. Congratulations on that grant.
Thank you, and I can't take credit solely for that work. We had a coalition of over 30 organizations who signed on to be a part of it, and as you know, coalition is important, and things don't get moved, especially legislation, without the voices of many. And so, all of our partners out there who came and put their reputations out there and leveraged their own resources to make sure that this could happen. That's the only reason we're here today. So I definitely want to shout out the folks who were a part of that coalition.
All right. Well, I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about the representation piece. So we've heard how students reacted to you being the principal of their school, but do you have a favorite educator growing up? And what specifically did you learn from them?
I had so many great educators. This is a really hard question for me to answer. I'll answer the one that the first one that came to my mind, and that was Mary Granderson. She was my chemistry teacher in high school, and at heart, I am a creative. I am a writer. I love to read. I love to sing. I love all of the creative aspects. Unfortunately, I didn't get the balance of loving both the creative side and also the STEM side. But she found something in me, and when I went into the chemistry class, I was really intimidated, but she made me love chemistry. And I would just go and hang out in her class at lunchtime. I didn't get the highest grade. I'll say I passed, and I passed with higher than the D, but it was well earned. And she made me believe that I could be a scientist. And it wasn't anything that I ever thought that I could do, but I think that is something about great teachers. They see something in you that you don't see in yourself, and they can bring it out of you. And it wasn't that she just taught the content. She made sure that we got the content, that we understood it, and that we could apply it. So, Mary Granderson, if you're out there, I just want you to know I love you and I appreciate you. And even though I didn't become a chemist, I think if I worked hard enough and I really had a great teacher, I think I might be able, if I wanted to, in a second career, be a chemist. Thanks to you.
Oh. Well, shout out to her and all of the educators out there being that person for their students. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about what you've seen in your like your leadership space. So when you're collaborating with people, I'm sure you're noticing different skill sets and what they bring to the table. So I'm wondering, what are some of the most effective things that school leaders you collaborate with have in common? That was a weird way to ask that question. I'm going to start over.
I
So
know
when
where
you're
you were going
collaborating,
though.
yeah, when you're collaborating with people, like what makes them effective? What are the top skills and attitudes, characteristics? What makes somebody easy to collaborate with?
Yeah. So one thing that we do at the Diversity and Leadership Institute, one of a few things that we do is also we do research, and we look at some of the practices that make racially diverse and equity focused leaders successful. And so last year we did a study called uh, uh, Within Reach, excuse me, Within Reach, and we looked at effective educator practices among school leaders in LA County. And these school leaders identified as Black or Latinx, they had on average higher math and ELA scores. They had higher A through G completion rates. And so we wanted to see what was it about their schools that made folks one want to work there, because we also saw something there in the data, and we also wanted to know what they were doing in their practice that was yielding the types of results that we were seeing. And there were a few things that rose to the surface, commonalities across these schools and school leaders. One, they had an intentional school culture, right? It wasn't something that they kind of happened to fall into, but it was something about their school culture that made teachers want to work there,
Mm.
that facilitated collaboration, and that also yielded really great results. And what we found was they were really thoughtful about what were the things that they wanted to put in place so that their school culture would be one where students and teachers could thrive. The second thing, and I jotted some of these things down, was a clear commitment to equity. So these particular leaders, before they even set foot on their campus and or took the job, had a commitment to equity, ensuring that students had what they needed, particularly marginalized students and students of color, students with lower income backgrounds. They wanted to make sure that they had the resources that they needed, but also that the people they brought into the building had the right mindsets when they were engaging with their students. And then also the one other major point that we saw was the elevation of educator voice, and also the engagement of community in their work or in their leadership. So teachers had a sense of autonomy. They felt like they had a voice, and because the leaders were thoughtful about who they brought into the school building when they were interviewing them, there was also a certain level of trust that one, they developed early on in the vetting process, but they were fostering over time. They brought in people that they knew had the right mindsets, and then entrusted them in making the decisions that needed to be made to ensure that all students would be able to achieve. So when I think about those types of leaders, and the results that they have been able to gather over time, those were, based on our research, were the three skills or areas that rose up time and time again among these school leaders of color in LA County.
I really love what you said about the individuals looking at what these particular student populations needed and then making sure the adults that were going to be teaching them had the right mindset, because that is what creates the psychological safety for students to be able to
Mm-hmm.
even exist in the classroom and be able to let their guard down enough to learn and be vulnerable, right? If I know that, my teacher understands what it means that I'm a low income student, then I don't have to like worry about being alone
Mm-hmm.
in something that may happen while I'm with, in the class with the other students, right? If something
Mm-hmm.
is like embarrassing, like I don't have like shoes, or, maybe I'm not
Mm-hmm.
like things happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if a
Mm-hmm.
teacher is able to be like, oh, okay, well, let me help you with this, or at least let me defend you, or make sure that, I just think students really need that to be able to go, all right, well, one, they got me, and two, like, let me sit down and actually learn these times tables or whatever else I'm doing, right?
Right. And when those educators even have shared experiences, right? If they
Mhm.
were the foster youth at one point, if they didn't have the resources, or if they received free or reduced price lunch, there's a certain shared experience and empathy and sympathy that I have, because I've been there and I want you to succeed. I want you to win. And so that's critical. And even if these educators don't necessarily look like our kids, if they understand and have a commitment to equity, then we can get there together. The reality is, in the state of California, we don't have the representation, so it's going to take um, all of us to get where we need to go. Right, it's going to take a commitment for all of us to get there together. And it's going to take a commitment on behalf of our legislators to invest, to ensure that we have the resources that we need to staff our schools, but also to figure out how we need to make this a more sustainable career choice for educators, right? So
Mhm.
all of that coming together is critical for our kids to know that, one, that they are seen, but they have the resources that they need in order to thrive.
Yeah, you are trying to solve all the different problems at once. Because, yeah, like the students have needs that they really need the adults that they interact with to be able to meet. And then at the same time, the adults have needs that are often not getting met. And they are stopping out, leaving, burning out. And yeah, we can't have that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. We
Mhm.
got to do better.
So I think that's a good segue. We're going to say something, Dr. Theo?
Nope, I'm up here taking notes.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's a really good segue into learning a little bit more about your personal leadership philosophy. So, you have been a teacher, a school founder, an executive director of a school, which I learned what the difference between an executive director and a principal is recently. So, maybe you'll have to tell us a little bit about that, because I don't know if too many people know the difference. And now you're the founder and a CEO of a nonprofit. So, one, can you tell us a little bit about the difference between, or if you even see it as a difference between an executive director and a principal? And then, two, tell us how your personal philosophy on leadership helped you navigate through those different career moves.
Sure. So to contextualize it for folks. So if you think about the job of a superintendent, right? They report to a board. They are supporting those who are at the site leadership level, so different principals, or maybe they have an executive cabinet. And a superintendent is on a very large scale. I was executive director for a single site charter school, so in some respects, I was the superintendent of that LEA, or that local education agency. And then we had a principal. My job was to report to the board, but ensure that I would advise the board on different policies or things that needed to be put in place. I also would fundraise outside of the dollars that the publicly funded dollars that we would get as a charter school. I also supported the principal, but also hired the principal and supported the instructional staff, and also was listed as the leader of the LEA, and for in other terms, like the superintendent, if you will, of that local education agency for the purposes of the CDE or any federal dollars. It was my responsibility and the board's responsibility to make sure that those dollars or those resources were allocated appropriate and used appropriately. So that's the difference between an executive director and a school site principal. The purview is a bit broader than it is for a school site principal. So that's a little bit of the difference. And there are probably other things that aren't coming to mind right now because it was a really big job, and one that I enjoyed very much, but very, very expansive role as that executive director. In terms of the different moves that I've made professionally, I started out as a classroom teacher in Chicago Public Schools, proud product of Chicago Public Schools. And then after teaching in CPS and really becoming well acquainted with the opportunity gap or the achievement gap or the equity gap, it's known as many things. I had a desire to see what else was out there in terms of urban education, and I thought that if I moved to greener pastures, that the narrative or the situation, the realities would be different. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to try and see what Los Angeles has to offer. I'm sure that kids are gonna be reading at grade level. It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be great, right? I'm just gonna make this move to LA and things are gonna be awesome. So my first few weeks teaching in Chicago I had a rude awakening, right? I was a product of a magnet school. My mother, my mother was a college, I'm second generation. My mother was first generation, but she was non-traditional first generation. She got her college degree at the age of 40 with 3 children. I was 5 when my mother graduated. And so once she understood how to navigate systems, my experience is very different. My public school experience was very different than my brothers who are 12 and 13 years older than me. So my mother was a bit more savvy about how to navigate school systems. And so once she figured that out, I was always in a magnet school. I was always in some type of math program, science program. She understood where the resources were and how to navigate.
Look, she knew you was going to be a chemist.
Right. I see something in you that you don't see. I know you're saying you want to be a writer, but I know. So once I moved and started teaching, I thought that my experience as, just getting this quality education was all of kids' experience. So when I got dropped on the west side of Chicago and started teaching, and my kids could barely read or could barely construct a sentence, and they were in 10th and 11th grade, and they told me they wanted to go to college, I was infuriated. Let's just be real. I was just infuriated. And I was just like, how? And how can I just go to school a few miles from here and my education be vastly different, still public school, vastly different than the kids that are in my classroom right now? And that was really my call to action. And I was trying to figure out what role do I play in public education to shift these things, because these kids look just like me, same experiences. We just on different sides of town. So it was from there that I moved to I was recruited to teach in Los Angeles. And that's when I was like, oh, so the difference between teaching in LA and teaching in Chicago was that the kids in LA were primarily Latino and couldn't read. And the kids in Chicago were primarily Black and couldn't read.
Yep.
That was it. And I was like, wow, okay, so this isn't a city problem. As you could tell, I was very green, right? This isn't a city to city. This is a systemic. This is something that is deep, right? And At that point, I was like, I think I want to open a school. And it might have been I think it was when I was in Chicago. I was like, I want to be a principal. Like, that is the role that is going to, at every level, I'm like, that's the role that's going to shift the system, right? And so had an opportunity some years later to open a charter school, found a charter school. And I thought, okay, great. Started getting really great results for the kids at my school, but then that didn't really address the broader issues. And so I guess I say all that to say my quest has always been to figure out, what is the level of impact, or where is this contribution that I can make, to shift things. And I now recognize that this is generational work, that we did not get here overnight, and it won't be solved overnight. And so, what I can do in some small way is to figure out while I'm here on this planet, what can I do in service, of community, of the generations of kids who are going to come after me, from my 5-year-old son who's in kindergarten right now. Like, what can I do? What role can I play, to make a difference? And so I went from being a practitioner to policy work, and not really realizing that, I'm also a deeply spiritual person, but all of those moves were guided and divinely orchestrated for me to do what I'm doing now. And I'm not saying this is the last stop on the journey, but it is where I am now. But everything that I've done has brought me to this point, and really thinking about the role that policy plays, in how we think about effectuating change for our students and for our educators. And so really these moves have been made, just based on where I'm supposed to be, what my purpose is, and where I'm placed. And then while I'm there, I'm trying to, wreak a little havoc, disrupt a little thing, some things
Right.
here and there, to move us from where we are to where we should be.
We love a good system disruption.
Yep.
One of Dr. Jackie's favorites.
And along those lines, so what advice do you have for people who want to be involved but are not like, maybe not like K through 12 educators, maybe not necessarily parents of, kids that go to school right now? There's a bunch of us, right? So how do we get involved and try to make education more effective for Black and brown children? Like, I'll call my state legislator. What you want me to tell them?
Yes, yes, yes. Thanks for the question. And I think that, um, that engagement can start on the local level. It can start for those folks who have children, in the public education system, or wherever you are, figuring out what's going on locally, and knowing what the data is as it relates to Black and brown communities. And then once you are aware of what the data say, what is the action, and what is the plan that said system has to address whatever that data say? And unfortunately, more likely than not, um, the data is not great, right? And so what are those systems leaders doing to address the need? What are some of the measurable outcomes that they have in place? And then how are they sharing that information out over time? So how do they keep you as a parent, as a constituent, if you aren't
Mhm.
a parent but you are, invested in your local school district? What is that saying? And then if it's coming back and there's no progress being made, how are you using your voice? Are
Mhm.
you standing up for public comment to say, like, hey, you've been reporting on Black student achievement data for the last year, and this needle hasn't moved, but you're still saying you're doing the same thing that you were doing last year? And that sounds like the definition of insanity to me. So what are you going to be doing differently to move the needle for our kids? It also looks like when there is something up, in the legislature that you can be a part of, can you get engaged in a local advocacy effort? You can sign up for the DLI newsletter, and there may be opportunities for you to engage there. But if not our advocacy organization, there are others that you can be involved in that are issue specific. So there are many issues that you can engage in. What are you most passionate about? And then what are you going to be consistent in? And I can name a few right now. There's an effort that we led in coalition with the Charting, of course, the Equity Coalition. That's a coalition that DLI engages in, around Black educator preparation, recruitment, and retention in LAUSD. That resolution came out about a little over almost 2 years ago. And so we've been engaging with the district on the implementation of that resolution, right? So there may be opportunities for you to engage DLI on that to figure out, okay, how has the district moved the needle for Black educators over the last year and a half plus? So just figuring out where you are, what the issues are, and then how you want to hold your local legislator, school board member, school district accountable.
Thank you. I'm signing up for the newsletter right now.
As we wrap and as we close, one question that I had that kept popping up in my mind was, what advice or what words of encouragement would you give to a classroom teacher that may be looking to become a principal, or that school principal that's looking to level up their space? What encouragement would you give them, as they are on their process journey and on their career journey to push them to that next level?
Sure. For our educators, and particularly educators of color, if you are in the Bay Area, or if you're in Los Angeles, or you're in driving distance to any of those two areas and you're interested in becoming a principal, DLI does have an Aspiring Principal of Color Fellowship. It's a 16-month fellowship that is completely tuition free. And we do that in partnership with Loyola Marymount University. And at the end of the 16 months, upon successful completion, our principals will receive a tier one, or aspiring principals will receive a tier one administrative credential. And that is a commitment that I have made and that DLI has made to ensure that we have a pipeline of Black and Brown school leaders throughout the state of California. So that's one step you can take, and you can go to our website and learn more about that. Another thing that I would encourage you to do is find a mentor, someone who is already sitting in that seat of a principal, and who can provide you with support, who can give you some guidance on what moves you should be making or should not be making, if that is if the role of principal is one that you want to take on. So I would start with that. And for our principals who may be looking for a systems leader role or a central office role, the advice in terms of like mentorship and support is the same. These roles, both the principal and aspiring and going leading up to becoming a principal, are very political. And there's an unspoken path that many of us are unaware of and are unfairly punished if we don't know how to make those moves. So I would say find someone who you know is invested in your success, or invested in the success of folks who look like you, and latch on to them and say, hey, like, you're doing something that I want to do. Like, how can we engage with each other? Is there any support that you're willing? Can we meet for coffee? And how can I learn? That's highly critical for both aspiring leaders and those in leadership looking to ascend to other roles.
Like building that social capital, it never fails. Your skill set is there. It's who you know, and do you understand how to get there?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Well, I thank you for your time today. Like I said, I was taking notes the whole time. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna take that to somebody I know.
Yep.
So that's for saying, for folks that are watching or listening, be sure to share this with someone you know as well. Dr. Jackie and I will be back for another episode real soon. But outside of that, thank you for being with us today, Dr. Laura. And I
Thank
think
you.
that is a wrap.
Yeah.
Take care.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. Remember, the way we build social capital is to build self and build others. We are sure you got some notes on your tablet, computer, or even using a pen and paper. Leave us a review, continue the conversation on social media at Black Social Cap, and share the show with someone you know. Until the next episode, stay motivated, rise together.